Hi, and welcome to another episode of Connecting Women Who Break Barriers. Today, I have the beautiful Rayne with me, who I've met through yoga. Thank you for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast
Great to
today.
be here.
Can you share a little bit about
Rayne. Well, I guess Rayne's a bit curious about life and very much a person that's always looking towards not bypassing experience, but seeing the bigger picture always. I think that's how, if I was to summarize Rayne, she's definitely someone that likes to constantly widen the lens versus get too stuck in the minutia of things. And I just really am inspired by people that really are authentic to themselves and know who they are regardless of what's happening around them. And I really admire strength in adversity that comes from a place of compassion versus needing to play small or be so big that the situation becomes maladaptive for people. Like I think at the end of the day, this is a hard question, actually, Aradhana. I've never been asked who is Rayne, in that way. But I think as a general question, I'm a human being who's trying to have a spiritual lens, but stay very grounded in my humanity. I would say that's probably who I am, and I'm just taking it day by day, like most of us, with different tools.
Yeah, I love that. And as you said, we've all got our own authenticity, and it's just a matter of shining that bright. And I know that's something that I've definitely learned from you, from your classes, because your classes are unique. But also, I'm going to share openly right now, whenever I've had minutes with you and I've been able to see you either as my osteo or as my yoga teacher, I could just be myself. There was no judgment, and these are the type of women I feel we all need in our corner, because we're all going through things, as you said. We're still navigating life, and we have different spiritual understandings or interests, but knowing that you can be yourself is probably the biggest blessing from people around you.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. It's kind of like, that's the feedback I get from a lot of people. And I guess when you are that way, you don't realize you're that way until someone shines that awareness back at you. And I guess I would hope that an authentic experience is that trust, that instant disarming is the key element to any kind of deeper relationship with anyone, anything, whether it's an animal or a human being, it doesn't matter. It's the same, isn't it? I think you're right. I think that is the authenticity that is lacking. I'm observing how much that's lacked. I feel like there's a lot of masks that people wear. And I find that part of life difficult to navigate sometimes. But intimately, when you're in a space with me, whether I'm a teacher, an osteopath, or just a person having a tea with you, I would hope that anyone feels that way, and I think everyone deserves that.
Yeah.
Because that's the only reason we're here.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you have a smaller group of friends or connections, having that person that you can just be yourself with and be vulnerable with as well makes a big difference. Because as you said, whether it's at work or at your home or even just with friends or other people, we tend to put on a bit of masks. And letting go of that mask, is that something that you've consciously done, do you believe, and leaned into your authenticity?
I think if I looked back over life, when I look at the tender hooks of being a young woman, even before that, a young child, emerging into my womanhood, I would say there was definitely a tendency to actually be quite quiet versus in a group setting with friends, I would be the shy one. That would be my label. And I think that attribute that I had was a place of safety. Say nothing and you can't upset anyone, probably was the wound that was generated out of. But it was also that incredible space of silence that allowed me to hear. And I think when I was a child, it was debilitating how I wouldn't go up and ask for help from a stranger. I was super shy, to the point that people are like, come on, Rayne, go. And they get so angry at me. It's like, I can't. I was like, I don't even know why I can't ask them.
Okay.
I just don't want to have rejection in any way, I guess. It's an adult. I don't feel safe with adult. I could create any story, even with the 52 years of the lens on that. But I think that a capacity to be silent and watch gave me a way of looking at the world that actually I realize is unique. I actually thought everyone sees it the same. You don't know what you don't know. But it kind of, with the undercurrent of spirituality, allowed me to see that we're all connected. And I wasn't looking for the separateness. Like, I think that as a teenager, inherently we go through this age of, I need to define myself, I need to be seen as an individual. But I never really felt like that was who I was. Okay. And I can't really put words to it. I haven't really thought about it until this moment in this time. I had a really defining moment, actually. I was probably 16. It was with a group of girls. And what I always knew when I was younger is people always stereotyped me as a snob because I was quiet. Yeah. Right? So they put this whole story on me, and it was all from a place of total anxiety that I was being quiet. I ended up having a sleepover, and she was the friend of the sister of the girl I was sleeping over with. And we had this huge discussion, and it was really like honest and raw. And she just stared at me and she goes, I had you all wrong. They were young, and she would have been younger than me, right? Yeah. And she's like, I just thought you were such a snob, and people say so many things about you behind your back, but I can't even believe the same person exists in front of me. And I just sat there and I go, I'm fully aware that is the story most people have of me, but I know who I am. And now do. Yeah. And I, at 16, what a weird conversation.
Yeah, exactly right.
But I was really grateful because it validated that part. Mm-hmm. That people have a lot they put on people. Yeah. And they know nothing about us, and I never want that for anyone. It's like, I don't want to put my shit on you. It's not fair. And if I do, I have to stop myself and go, away, that's mine. Yeah. That's unique. I do know that's unique.
Yes. Very unique. And I think just extending to that a little bit further, that's something even for our listeners to really be conscious of. When we meet people, there's a saying, your first impression lasts. But it's not always right. Because the thing is, the first impression could be someone's out of their comfort zone, something else has happened prior to you meeting them, or it could just be they're having a minute. Irrespective of whether they're having a minute or not, allow that person just to be that person. And I think, especially with social media and life as it is these days, judgment is quite heavily talked about, but also something that is actually happening. People are aware that they're judging others, which is a good thing because there is that self-awareness. But it's a matter of how do we try not to judge others. And the way that you've explained it is that people have a preconceived idea about us majority of the time. And we don't necessarily want them to have that, and that's their choice. But that doesn't define us in any sense. So if we can define ourselves or be comfortable in our own skin.
I mean, if you just think about it, you could be at the pool, and like a public pool, and you're just chilling out and you see someone and they make an expression, and all of a sudden you create this whole story. Mm-hmm. Like, I've had my daughter even say a whole story about what she thinks someone else is thinking about her. And it's just like, she's exactly a snapshot of what we all do. And it's just like, but babe, you've got no idea what they're thinking. Yeah. But you think you do, and you create so much suffering from this thought that's based on a concept that has no space, but the one that you give it. Yeah. And I just find that fascinating. And you catch yourself doing it all the time. Yeah. I mean, the change has to come from a very young age, and it has to become the way that we are even in our classrooms, And I mean, it really is, the dogmaticness of the changing has to happen at that level for anything really to change. Yeah. But I guess the only thing that you and I and people that are more open to looking a little bit bigger than our own short-sightedness have tools that allow us to do that. And it's usually silence. Yeah. But most people are so busy. Yeah. So I don't know really, in the grand scheme of things, how this really matriculates into society. Mm-hmm. But I just know that it's all an individual concept. So it all begins with you, and just bring it back to you all the time. It's like, why? Yeah. What did I add to that versus who you are? That's not who I am, but it's like, who am I? Just keep coming back to that question, I suppose.
One thing that I've learned from you, which has definitely helped me in extension to what you're saying, is when I explain what's happening with me, is it a story or is it a fact? And have I flavored that, that fact a little bit further to make myself either feel better in that moment or to validate my feelings because someone did something or whatever the situation is. But I think that is something, if we can consciously be aware of, is that what's the story or the narrative that I keep playing, and am I spicing that story every time to validate a feeling that I want to feel again, whether it's a negative or a positive feeling. The stories are an opportunity for us, if you can't sit in silence, for us to be an observer.
Yeah, 100%. The question that I always ask is it true?
Yeah.
Is that really true?
Yeah.
And ask it multiple times, not just once. Don't just hear it in your head and say, is it true? It's like, no, is that really true for you, what you just said? And you can do it out loud or internally, but it's you got to keep hitting it, because it's usually on the third to fifth time of asking the question that you realize, oh my gosh, what an insight to yourself, But it is a simple question, and it is one I ask a lot.
Yeah, and it's a powerful question if you're willing to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it starts, is that honesty and that vulnerability is what's going to allow you to really understand yourself better, and also understand why you think people think a certain way about you, and also what they think, whether it's even relevant or necessary. And a lot of the time it's actually not even relevant, and it's misconception of whatever they're thinking, or it's part of their own narrative. So just something for us to be aware of is like, what stories are we telling ourselves? Are they really empowering us, or are they like making us feel a little bit more uncomfortable in whatever situation we're going through?
I mean, that's it, isn't it? Like, we are just a culmination of our stories. Didn't sugarcoat that in any way, but we are just a belief system that's full of, banked upon stories that have been reinforced because we're so rigid in that belief system.
Yeah.
And the only way it's going to change is unless your belief system gets challenged, and that's hard. I mean, that's a big one. Like, people believe what they believe, and it's not for anyone to convince anyone of their narrative that they need to live. That's their life, that's their choice, and there's actually a lot of freedom in just that.
And even though, as you said, some of our belief systems start from a younger age, or however we've grown up or whatever we've experienced, as an adult, I think one of the biggest freedoms we do have is choice. They say the older you get, the harder it is to change, but I want to challenge that a little bit, because I think when you sit in the silence, when you sit with your own self and you understand who you are, or take the time to understand yourself better, is that actually serving me or not? What's your belief on whether we can change even as an adult?
Hell no, that's not true at all. I would say I have more wisdom. When I've gone through menopause, all of these really physical transitions that happen for women into their wisdom. I call it the burning into the wisdom years. But I would say I have so much more clarity, and in that clarity is the change, right? So less pushed and pulled by what people want. I think as the older you get, I'm at 52 now, I'm just like, I'm too old to play the game.
Yeah.
I don't want to play any games. I just want to enjoy my life. I want to enjoy the little things, and I just don't want to be in drama. Yeah. So I actually think wisdom is where the clarity comes, and you can see that probably throughout most society. I don't see that, there's a very rare enlightened child that's coming into this world nowadays, right? Like, it's through life experience that we grow wise.
Yeah.
So, but the change only comes with the desire to change. Yeah. And that's the question.
Yes.
I don't think that's bound by age.
One reason I wanted to touch on that, and going a little bit deeper into your yoga journey, and I know with Yoga Nidra, if we explain that a little bit more to our listeners, you can get to deeper layers of your own being and actually start to heal from the inside out. So can you share a little bit about your yoga journey, and specifically Yoga Nidra, because I feel Yoga Nidra is more powerful than people understand.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm always excited to talk about it because it's so accessible.
Yeah.
So yoga for me has been from a young girl. My mom did yoga when I was young, and I watched. I didn't necessarily want to do yoga because my mom was doing yoga, right? So I did the very classic do the opposite thing. Yeah. But it does get in. It's there. And yoga is in my teens, and I started to really want to do yoga classes on my own, seek it out, became the mat rat and all the things, but the spiritual side of it and the deepening happened in later years because it was a practice that physically called me, as it should when you're in your 20s. You should be doing all the physical stuff because that's where you're at in your dosha timeline of life. But Yoga Nidra came to me in the early, or I'd say the late 90s. Keep in mind that I was born in Canada, North America, and I do have to say Yoga Nidra and a lot of the practices were actually more in North America than in Australia. Like when I came here in Australia, no one was talking about Yoga Nidra. I was just like, this is interesting. Like no one's, but I didn't talk about it. It was just my dirty little secret, this practice. And it actually was the very practice that helped me get pregnant. And so why? Because it was working with the subconscious mind. I'll briefly go over it, but you go through these layers that allow you to bed in your subconscious mind. So we're all in the conscious self kind of mind. We're very aware of our self-consciousness. And then you get into that subconscious and then the super conscious mind. You know, like that's the layering of Yoga Nidra. I have to say it was random that I heard it. Nothing's random, but it was random that it found me. But I'm like, all right, I'm going to lie down. And this man's voice came on still to this day. Don't ask me who this person is. And I've studied so much Yoga Nidra and all the lineages, and I haven't found this voice. But anyway.
Wow.
This voice did the full, it was very Satchitananda Yoga Nidra, which was very strict, very 8 stages. You've got to do it such and such and such, but it was all about sankalpa. And sankalpa is your heart's longing. It's like that truth that you have to follow above all other truths. And you need to believe it. And you start at the very beginning of the practice of Yoga Nidra. You'll usually say, some people say just stay awake and aware. That could be an intention, or it could be something more. It's something that you want to achieve in the next 6 to 18 months. And you have to believe it with all of your heart, and you have to feel that it's true for you. So that's really an important part of it. But you plant it once you're really relaxed in the delta state of your mind. You go through time, you start to drop into the lower frequencies of the mind, and that is where the soil of change is. When you get into your subconscious mind, when you're relaxed past the busyness, when you're awake, you're in this beta state of activity, your eyes are open. The moment you close your eyes, you start to drop into alpha, you start to relax. But then there's this stage where you drop into theta, and that's when people see lights and stuff behind their eyes, lots of imagery, but that's still not Yoga Nidra. I just want to make that clear for listeners. That's not Yoga Nidra. That's great. And people love that space and get really hooked. They love theta because your subconscious mind is starting to unload, and it unloads as flashes, images, screens. That happens for everyone. No one in the world can't do that. It is accessible if led properly. But then the delta comes. And delta is that state of genius. And delta is a state that, you know, people, if they understand it, when people are put into coma, they're put into delta because it's the healing state. And it's profound because you're starting to lose your I-ness. You're losing form. Like you're starting not to feel a body anymore. You start to become spacious because we are more space than matter. So you're starting to become closer to the truth of who you are, which can scare the crapola out of people because they're so convinced that they're just a body. And people will get scared and sometimes come out of Yoga Nidra. But if you can learn through guidance to sit in that delta state, and then you drop in that sankalpa again, it will come to be. I did Yoga Nidra without any kind of intellectual understanding. I just did it and I didn't understand it and I just loved it. And I could go very deep very quickly. But my sankalpa for 10 years was I am pregnant. And I tell this story all the time because I teach Yoga Nidra immersions to teach people the beauty of this technique that leads to a state. And people are confusing the technique with the state. But in that practice, I became pregnant against all odds. No one believed that I could do it physically because of all the science behind what my numbers were saying, how few eggs and all that stuff and age. I got 2 babies.
Love it.
And I saw them. I believed it. And everyone was saying, no, you can't. And I said, but I can see it. I believe it. And I really did. It doesn't matter what you're going to say to me. I'm going to have these babies. And to the point, it gets so specific the more you believe. I knew I was going to have a girl first. and I knew there was a boy coming, and everyone's like, no boy. And he literally was my last egg. My last egg never had a period again. I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But I knew it.
Yeah.
You know, powerful technique.
Yeah. And also, not only were you healing yourself, you're putting yourself in a good position to have children, so that they're also coming with a lot of love and care, because you've been taking care of yourself and you wanted them out of love, not just because you wanted kids.
Yeah, but it doesn't make it easier, people.
No,
I don't want to say
not
that.
At all. Not
Good
at
Lord,
all.
when they come out, like, it doesn't make it all, you know, rainbows and unicorns. It's definitely come with its challenges, but I still use that practice.
Mm-hmm.
And Yoga Nidra is a great practice because people sometimes really struggle with the idea of meditation. It feels quite strict. It feels like there's a lot of work and effort involved. Mm-hmm. That's all a misconception, but a lot of people put a blocker up, and maybe it just even physically, this position of meditation looks a bit too spiritual for people. I don't know. Sometimes there's a lot of dogma around it. Yeah. But Yoga Nidra, you just lie down and you just feel and you listen. Literally, that's it. If you're doing effort, you are getting in the way of Yoga Nidra. And so it's really accessible. The one point I'll end on with Yoga Nidra, myself and my partner, Sarah Makado, when we run these Yoga Nidra immersions, like, we're very passionate about making the distinction between Yoga Nidra as a technique, as I've alluded to, and the state of Yoga Nidra. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times people think that Yoga Nidra is, if I just do a 20-minute practice, that I am going to get this 20-minute benefit of being in the state of Yoga Nidra and be equal to 4 hours of sleep. That's what they say. Mm-hmm. And why that's incorrect is because they're not in the state. Mm-hmm. You're in the technique of it. Yeah. Nidra can be short, but you're only relaxing. Yeah. The deeper the practices, the delta state practices are quite long. They're between 30 to 45 minutes typically, but it doesn't mean it's not beneficial, and it doesn't mean you can't plant yourself kalpa.
Even just getting started, I think, is a great place to be. Yeah. And if that means it's a shorter one, as you said, just getting used to just lying there and giving yourself
permission,
space. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Space just to be, and let the magic do its own thing.
Yeah. And I think that's actually the beauty of everything, is that you get permission to let your persona rest. I say that as a cue quite a lot. Yeah. Just let all your worries, all your troubles, just for this period of time, just let them all go. Mm-hmm. And just lie in a receptive way. And that's actually really hard for the average person, because they don't know what rest is. Yeah. So that is a huge healing just in itself, just to lie down. You haven't even done the practice, and you're probably doing more than probably 95% of the population, just with the intention to lie down. Yeah. And then there's the question of, I always fall asleep when I do Yoga Nidra.
Yes.
And so that's a different conversation. You need to be awake and aware. You need to be aware in the state of Yoga Nidra to reap the benefits of being conscious in the deeper states. It doesn't mean that your awareness isn't awake when you fall into the snores, because that happens in many Nidra classes. And I always say, you know what, sometimes you're just bloody tired and you just need to sleep. Yeah. And that's okay. And you got exactly what you needed. Your awareness still receives it. Mm-hmm. It still receives it. But as a practice, I would think of all the things that I do, it's the thing that grounds me and it keeps me quite steady. But there's also times in my life when I can't do Yoga Nidra. Like right now, I'm going through a really hard time with my daughter. She's 13 and she's got an eating disorder. And it's a very real problem, and it's not talked about. And I tend to be a bit of a mouthpiece about it. But I can't sit in Yoga Nidra right now because I can't allow myself that space to do that type of practice. I need to do other practices. I need to do a lot more mantra-based practices. I need to do a lot more visualization. And you could say, well, why can't you do Yoga Nidra? Why can't you plant that seed? Because right now my resources are low and I don't have a lot of time. Yeah. So I need to be really, whatever I do, it could just be spending time in my garden. I need to be in a different frame. And it's so Yoga Nidra or meditation or what that looks like can be different. It doesn't have to be lying down either, right? So, but it's a practice that you can come in and out of. It doesn't have to be done every day. But when you're in stress in your life, it's nice to have like a 10-minute practice to go to, you know, and I usually do a balancing practice versus a deep delta practice right now. That's all I can do. Relaxation is what I need. So that's where I'll stay in my practice. And It's just the point I'm trying to make is it adapts to what you have the capacity to do.
Yeah, and also a valid point, what you said as well, is sometimes you only have 2 minutes available. But rather than going on your phone or trying to distract yourself, there is something else that you can do, because that 2 minutes is still going to be beneficial to some extent versus nothing.
Yeah, 1 minute of stillness is what they say, you're Buddha. You're Buddha for a minute. A Buddha for a minute, if you can be still and fully silent for 1 moment, you are Buddha. So it doesn't need to be sitting on a mountaintop for 5 hours. It's literally a moment. Yeah, is all you need.
And a moment allows you just to even breathe a little bit deeper and get out of whatever funk it is that you're going through, because that's still going to be there at, after you finish your own practice. But yeah, giving yourself a minute, I think, is doable for everyone.
We have so many blockers to that. Even that statement, I can feel a million different voices going, yeah, but. And I guess that's the belief. Yeah, but. And that's what we're talking about. It's like, well, is that true? Is that really true?
So here's the opportunity to create change. We've given you a few different ways to be able to do that. And yes, but the choice is yours.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you've been doing yoga for, quite a period of time. Other than yoga, what is something else that you've found has helped you navigate life's ups and downs, moving from another country to Australia, and even just as a female who's wanting to succeed in their own right and shouldn't be doing that, if that's something that you have a desire to do, what's something that you've done that has kept you grounded but also inspired to keep going?
Listening to my heart. I really love Qigong as well. I do a lot of energetic work as an osteopath. I've a healing tendency. I'm pretty sensitive to that. So that really serves me. But the being in the natural world is actually the thing that I crave the more as I get older. Mm-hmm. Just spending time in my backyard, just listening to the trees, the birds, that's what grounds me. And I don't want to be all cliche and say, go barefoot and ground yourself, but there's something to that, and I am starting to want to get out of the confines of studio spaces and be outside more. I think that creative spark is pulling me in a different direction than what I've been in. It scares me a little because it's not clear. I've got kind of like a personal thing with fear. The more I fear something, the more I have to do it. And I really mean that. It's like I really, really was afraid of sharks. I grew up with Jaws, man, and that screwed me up. And I went to Australia, the motherland of all the dangerous things in the world. And I just remember distinctly, it was in my 20s, and we went to Port Douglas, and everyone was going for a dive. And I was saying, no, I'm not going for a dive. I'm afraid of sharks. I'm going to wear that belief system. I'm afraid of sharks. And somebody couldn't equalize as they went down. So they wouldn't refund his dive. And I said, well, then I think I have to go under. Mm-hmm. And I said, because I had that feeling that I'm describing, is I really fear this, so I've got to do it. This urge, this desire, this heart calling, it's you got to go in, girl. And so I said to the diving instructor, okay, I'm going to go in, but I'm going to guarantee you there's going to be a shark down there. And they were adamant, no, there hasn't been sharks in about 3 weeks. We haven't seen anything. And we were just down and it's totally clear. I was like, no, there will be a shark. And I'm just letting you know, I'm very afraid and I'm going to be very close to you. Mm-hmm. Well, the moment we went under the water, this the under the waves of the mind feeling, on top, so much fear. It was just so agitating. And the moment you dive under, and I think I'm a little addicted to this feeling now, I dive under and it was quiet. So quiet. And all I could hear was my breath. Sounds like meditation, right? It was so amazing. And then there, I literally was like Nemo's cliff. You're looking off into the depth of the darkness, and it was dark and it was deep, and there was a bronze whaler shark, and it was huge. And I was signaling shark, but it was actually really a peaceful experience. Nice. And I think that's metaphor is actually what I think is really important. Mm-hmm. The more you fear something, the more you have to do it, because underneath it, there's such a peace there. Because you realize it was all in your mind and it was all above the waves. Yeah. It's it's not true, but you think it is because, oh my God, it has to be. But I think those are the things that reground me and recalibrate me is that real belief system that if it's uncomfortable, you're growing.
Mm-hmm.
Growth doesn't feel great.
Yeah.
Actually, it feels shit most of the time. That's the truth.
Yeah, exactly.
Pardon my French. That excites me. And so right now I'm at this transition point. It's like, oh, I feel like I need to actually share more Qigong. I'm totally certified trainer. I teach, I can do it. But it was kind of like when I became a yoga teacher, I resisted it. Didn't want to do it. Everyone's like, Rayne, you should teach. I'm like, I don't want to teach. And I still go through days like that. It's like this worthiness to do it is my fear. You know, I'm not worthy enough, that old catch cry, to stand in front of anyone because I'm no better than anyone else. I'm just the same as you. Yeah. But we all have things to share, and I can wear many hats with that same experience. But it was fearful, so I did it. And so I've done it. And now I feel I need to evolve because it's being asked of me. Mm-hmm. And it's just listening. It's like, okay, I have no idea what that looks like, but I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah. And let's see what happens. And if it blows up,
you tried.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you don't try, then you'll always regret. And I'm just not into regretting life. I don't want to leave this earth with regrets. Yeah. That's number one for me. Yeah. It's like one of the biggest regrets of dying is not doing what you wanted to do in life. And I just don't want that one on my gravestone. Yeah. She regrets. Like, no.
Exactly. The list was endless and it's not being crossed off.
Yeah. Just so I guess that's it. Just listen to your heart and be fearless. That's it. Yeah.
And even, like leaning into the fear, no matter how much you're fearing it, on the other side is always some form of liberation or excitement or even, I didn't like that, I'm not doing it again. But you have an answer. It's not like you get left unknown.
Yeah.
Rather than thinking, what if?
And it's that moment when you push into fear that, really lean in, like not just a little dip of the toe, and you drop in and you get this really expansive feeling. Mm-hmm. Like it's the feeling that I say that I'm addicted to, but I think I actually am. Like when I jumped out of the airplane and did skydiving, I fully had no fear. Like the moment I jumped off, I was just free. It was amazing. And I was just joyous and I was just in it. And I think fear stops you from being in the present moment. And the moment you get through it, you're just like, and then the mind wants to get back into the experience. But there's that moment where you're like, oh, that's it. That's life. Yeah. That's true. Everything else was an illusion. And I think that I might be slightly addicted to it. But yeah. And that's what Yoga Nidra does to me as well.
What I was reflecting on what you were just saying then is it's actually helping you be present and actually appreciate all different things of life rather than just being, well, I'm not going to try.
Yeah.
Some exciting news. I know that you've released some beautiful singles recently, and you've mentioned briefly how you got some funds from your beautiful grandma to be able to do that. Do you want to share a little bit about that journey with us?
Yeah, my grandmother passed away in 2022 now, and she was a real divine spark in my life. My mom was mentally ill, so my grandmother was like my other mother. She was a stable force for me. But when she passed, all of a sudden my heart started to say, this kind of repeated inner voice says, you got to share your voice. And I'm like, God, I'm teaching yoga. I'm out there. I'm doing all these things. And then one day it's like, no, you've got to share your voice because your voice is your mother and your father's voice. And they live in regret. And here we go in that circle. I don't like regrets. Yes. And I believe that each generation is a capacity to change that trait, that ancestral wound. And for my mom and my dad, who were musical by nature, both live in regret they didn't follow their musical dreams. And I was like, what does that mean though? Like, I'm not trained in any way. I'm just a humble person that likes to sing. I sing in the shower or whatever, nothing major. But this overwhelming thing was, no, you've got to share your voice. Like proper, like record it and put it out there. And I was like, oh my God, this total fear shakes, like all of it, because I have all of these people around me that could make 1 million more albums than I, like, who am I? Like most people don't even know that I sing, right? Like I actually don't sing that often. And when I do, it's rare, and it usually is inspired by something that just passes through me and all of a sudden I'm singing. Yeah. So, and then the other thing is if I sing, it has to be mantra. Which again, I'd say none of my friends, anyone that I know in life, knows anything about and has total ideas and beliefs about what mantra is. And I'm like, oh God. So not only do I have to sing mantra.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
very specific.
Okay, great. So I'm like, thankfully for me, I have a very incredibly talented musician, Phoebe Dubar, who goes by Ixer. I keep seeing rainbows everywhere. And she had done a Yoga Nidra collaboration with me. I call them gateway practices for Yoga Nidra. So people that aren't comfortable with silence, she plays her ambient sound through them. And although not traditionally is Yoga Nidra with music, I felt quite strongly, even though my teachers said no, I think people need it because they're not comfortable with stillness. And this is music it's coming from source. Like, she's so divine. So I feel like I'm meeting them there. And so we created that. But I was like, Phoebe, I think I need to make an album. And she's like, all right, babe, like, I'll produce it for you. And I'm like, okay. And so what happened over that period of time is money. Obviously, you've got to pay. You have to pay. You got to produce it. There's a lot of expense to put your creative thing out there. And I didn't have a lot of money. When my grandmother passed away, all of a sudden I had this bursary. And what I said was, this X amount needs to go towards this album. And my husband's like, yeah, whatever. Okay. But, he's supportive. But you know what I mean? It's like, this is just what has to happen. This is extremely important to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then the melodies started to come. So mantra usually it's got a very set pentameter of which allows its Shakti or its power to move, right? So we've got all of these mantras out there that have different melodies. It's a lot less colorful. It's a little bit more like this.
Yeah.
But I started to get all of these really strong rhythms coming through my body, and I'd wake up and I'd have a melody and I record it and I put it down. I'm like, oh my God, Phoebe, like, they're coming in so quickly right now. And she's like, we just do one at a time.
You're ready.
Yeah, I was ready. And it's funny, the very first one was right after my grandmother died. We finally recorded, because I'd already planted the seed. It was already starting, but I was like, I didn't have the means. How am I going to afford to do this?
Yeah.
Universe has your back if it's meant to be. But I recorded Pranamida, which is about returning into wholeness. And the day that I recorded that particular song, my grandmother had died, and she literally was in the room when we were recording. And it was so beautiful for me. It was such a beautiful recording. And I also sang Amazing Grace for her, because the day that my grandmother died, she died in North America. I'm in Australia.
Yeah.
But through the powers that be of kind of reflecting back in time, I was actually at the light practice, and before teaching, I started to sing Amazing Grace. And I was really thinking about my grandmother, and it turns out she passed away right then.
Wow.
And my students could feel it as well. Whoa, that was very powerful. So there's a lot of my grandmother in there, but it's called Kismet, and it's about changing destiny.
Yeah.
And it's just a little humble offering, but it's so much my heart. It scared the absolute bejesus of me to put out there, and it still makes me kind of uncomfortable.
Oh, so I'm glad I brought it up.
Yeah, I know. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm still adjusting, but it's out there, and I'm not attached to it at all. Like, I literally have left it out there, but it's, I guess it's when I put it out there, I actually posted about it because I think I want people to be inspired by the fragility of putting it out there, knowing that, yeah, I'm not a musician. People are going to be maybe judging that, and maybe they're going to say it's a good voice, bad voice, it's good, it's bad, whatever. People are going to put stuff. That's what the creative thing is. Like, I used to do photography, putting your picture up in front of the room and having your peers rip it apart, like, it's your heart.
Yeah.
And so you have to be vulnerable. To be an artist requires so much strength. Oh my God, it's so much strength. And my heart goes out to artists that really put themselves out there every day, regardless, because it's tough. But I think it inspires people. It's like, who cares? Like, who cares what anyone else thinks? You did it for you. And that's what I hope the inspiration, the energy of that particular offering is. So Kismet's out there.
Yeah. And Kismet.
Yeah.
Is really beautiful. Something, from an Indian perspective, it's like you get to build some of your destiny. You've got this flavor to it, and like, the means come, the universe always has your back. even me moving into this place and re-establishing the podcast, I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And, Rayne and I tried this a few times and it didn't happen. But again, when it's meant to, it's meant to. And I think in life, when we allow things to just flow a little bit too and start following those nudges or the inner voice, your heart telling you, do it, keep trying, keep going out of your comfort zone. For anyone that hasn't heard Rayne's beautiful album, it's worth listening to on replay for sure. And it's something that it's from your heart, and I think that's what matters the most. It's not that something you did it for accolades or anything like that. There's, as you said, a beautiful connection to where it's come from. It's got your parents in it, it's got your grandma in it too. And I think if we can think about life a little bit like that, where we're doing things because we want to share a part of who we are, rather than we're just doing it because we're doing it, and that's what's the buzz thing right now. If you're following your heart, I don't feel it ever lets you down. And it's not about the number of people that listen to it or anything like that. It'll be what it will be. But it's like your heart's being put out there in such a beautiful way.
It's my ripple, and it's
exactly.
that's the thing with vibration in particular, and that's why it's even more powerful. It's vibration.
Yeah.
And vibration is so powerful. Mantra is so powerful in that way, and it's beyond words. So people want to understand it, but you can't understand mantra through the mind. You actually have to receive it as a vibration and let it move you. And I've had such interesting feedback from different tracks, because each track meets the person's vibration where it's at. People will have a favorite mantra because it's what they need. It's their medicine right now.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean the other ones aren't good. It's just that's not your medicine.
Yeah.
You got what you got.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. But I think just do what makes you a little uncomfortable, and don't be so worried about what anyone else thinks. In fact, don't give a shit.
Yeah. And just the last point that you said, which I'd like us to just go a little bit more into, about inspiring other women, because this podcast is to inspire women, and I know that we have male listeners as well. So this is for everybody. There's no gender bias here. But how do you feel for yourself that you want to do things that are out of your comfort zone, that create a little bit of fear in you? Fear is a really big thing at the moment, and I even feel it a lot with colleagues, with other people everywhere. And whatever's happening in society, if you're that kind of person that does listen to those things a little bit more than your own self, how do you feel like you can get back into inspiring yourself just a little bit more, rather than letting the outside noise determine your next steps?
I'm sure everyone would love the quick answer to that. I think it's so unique and individual to the person what that means. So I'm not going to say that I have the one answer for everyone, but it's just, you've got to know yourself. And the truth is, most people don't.
Yeah.
Because they have sidestepped themselves consciously or unconsciously their whole life. And so what they're doing, they might think they're their vocation, their success. Yeah. Some people might be just thinking they're a failure. Mm-hmm. That's tricky. Yeah. But the inspiration for living comes from just being happy to be alive. And I know that's so simple, but that's it. It's just that you're here, you are a gift. The fact that you live and breathe, no matter your color, your race, your culture, your creed, I don't care. You're here. We're all here, and we're all human. And no human is better than the other. That is society that's created that construct. That's not the truth of life. In the natural world, there's a hierarchy as well. In the animal kingdom too, right? Like, that's the nature of life and death. Yeah. But there's a balance to it. And at the end of the day, we're all living and breathing cells. And I think if you can just come back to the simplicity, that's probably one of the best tools. It's like, we're all so overcomplicated. It was funny. I was teaching a class the other day. I'm going to share this because I think it's actually, ironically worked out to be a very powerful lesson for everybody. But we're in a studio, you're right, and you pay your money to get into your boutique studios. It's super expensive, very, very privileged to come into this space. And there was construction on, and it was so loud. And this was a yin and Nidra class, and it was full bore. Like, they had their music pumping, and they started singing on the roof. Like, it was like, I don't know how. Well, okay, I'm like, Rayne, obviously these people in this room needed to learn something. What is it? And I just sat for a moment, it's like, okay. So what we ended up doing was I said, that noise that you're starting to react to is your mind. It's not something outside of you. It's like literally, if you could listen to your mind, it sounds like that. And it really was out of control. Like what was happening? We were laughing and taking the piss out of it. It was like, oh my God, sweet Jesus, you can't make this shit up. But it was bad. But I'm like, we laugh, but your mind's exactly like that. And so you can choose to just go down the rabbit hole of what that is, or you could observe what you're doing. And so I think that's it. It's like just, you've got to have something, a reference point of realizing, whoa, I got stuck in the rabbit hole. And the moment you just take a moment and notice, take a deep breath, let go, there's the silence again. But it's the only way you're going to know yourself is to get still with yourself. And most people don't want to do that. So how do we move forward? How do we give advice to anyone else? Given that what I've just said, we're all in different constructs and beliefs of the world. We're all in the same world, but we all look at it totally differently. Is just to stop looking outside, close your eyes and look inside and feel. Just feel your heart and just say, how am I feeling? What do you want? What do you want, babe? What do you need? And then listen to the answer and do that. Yeah. That's it. I think that anyone can do, but most people don't.
But that's also when you do that, that's when you get the inspiration for the next steps as well. That thing that I keep putting off, now I'm going to actually go and do it. Because I'm ready or I'm listening.
We're listening, right? Like how many times you're driving the car, you're trying to go someplace, your little voice says turn left and you go right, and you're like, damn it, I should have went left. Like we're constantly doing that every day. That little voice is talking to you constantly, but your other voice is so loud that you can't hear it. So it's the difference. People constantly ask me, what's the difference, Rayne? How do you know it's not your ego? And how do you know it's your soul that's talking to you? And let's not be hard on the ego. We need one. It gets us through this world. So let's just have that conversation. But your heart is a whisperer. It doesn't demand. It's not charged. It's not saying you got to. Yeah. You know, it's just like, go left. It's not like go right, like yelling at you. It doesn't yell. It's the same voice from the moment that you were little to the moment you die. It's an unchanging voice and it's just steady. That's it. It's like, I think people don't realize that because we all have the voice. Our intuition, our gut. There's, so many different narratives of what it's called, but it's like your inner wisdom is only yours and only you can live it out however you choose to. Yeah. And it sounds like you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It doesn't sound like bloody Stephen Hawking. It's your voice. Yeah. And it's just a quiet whisper. And I think that you can't hear a whisper if you're really noisy. So there's no way around it. Looking at a screen isn't the place you're going to hear it. Yeah. Even listening to music necessarily is not going to be the place you hear it, but it might help you get there and then shut it off and be quiet for a minute. But I think, it's just that's the number one piece of advice for whoever you are, is like the only way you're going to get to know yourself is to shut up and be with yourself. Yeah. And not with your mind. Yeah. Thank you. That was really amazing. And as I said, please follow Rayne. She's mainly on Instagram. Gosh, I have to be honest, like I'm not a social internet diva, but my Yogini Rayne is where all my offerings are. But my album and all the things are there if you're interested. But otherwise, I will definitely be playing some of it and sharing it. So if you'd like to listen, as Rayne said, the offering is available. The other thing, just for anyone that doesn't know Rayne, she does teach in studio, as she mentioned. We didn't go into that detail, and maybe we'll do that one day to go into different parts of yoga. But also, Rayne briefly mentioned that she teaches Yoga Nidra with her partner, Sarah. So there is actually an offering coming up soon. Yeah, in November, we're doing an immersion for Yoga Nidra in Caulfield here in Melbourne. It's a 2-day immersion, and it's really sweet. we had initially had them as 2 separate levels, but we're amalgamating them. And it's for anybody that's interested in Yoga Nidra. So you don't have to go and teach in a studio or anything. A lot of people ask me, can I teach after? Yeah, for sure you can. Anyone can teach Yoga Nidra. There's a million scripts out there. But Yoga Nidra is not a practice of reading scripts. It's a practice of embodiment. And that's where Sarah and I come from in our lineage, and that's what we're sharing. And we're also trying to set the record straight on what Yoga Nidra is and definitely what it's not. And there's a lot of confusion out there right now. So yeah, it's a great offering. I'm really excited about it. So if you're interested, you can get on again through Yogini Rayne on my Instagram. It's in my link, so you can always access all that information. But it also is called The Space Between Yoga Nidra.
And just a final question for me, for anyone that's interested, if you're not already a yoga teacher or have done other yoga training, do you need to have any training to do this?
God, no.
So that was the answer I wanted you to hear from Rayne, because it's accessible to anyone. And if you feel like yoga physically is not something that resonates with you and you haven't tried it and you don't want to try it, Yoga Nidra, as Rayne beautifully explained, is accessible to everyone. You get a chance to rest and you get a chance to lie down there and, take the time for yourself. So it is 100% accessible. It's great for kids as well. So if you've got any family and friends that you think could benefit from it, I'd highly recommend learning it for yourself with Sarah and Rayne.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And it was great having you on the podcast today. And
thanks for having me,
as usual. Yeah. Thank you for everything that you offer, for always sharing your wisdom without any concern, and also just like being yourself. As I said right at the start, it's not something we experience every day, getting to meet people and also having the opportunity to be yourself, where you can share, even whether it's a bit of your struggles or your wins. Either way, having someone like you in my life is a beautiful blessing, and I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you for listening, everyone. It's been a beautiful episode. I hope you have enjoyed it, and until next time, take care.